So today I am doing the If I Could Only Keep One challenge. Now the point of this challenge is that if you could only keep one of your favourite author's books, what would it be? So your task is to pick some of your favourite authors and decide if you could only keep one of the books. Pick. And I was tagged to do this by Chloe over at Chloe Reads Books. I kind of delayed doing this because I was like, I don't know if I'm ready. And I thought, nah, get it over with, get it done. Let's just go for it. And I did struggle, to be honest. I struggled finding authors. I've learned that I read a lot of the same authors. So I started out with I'm going to go from fifth favourite upwards. My fifth favourite author that I could think of at this present moment was Cassandra Clare. Now, I struggled as to whether I could include Cassandra Clare's books because I've only ever read the Shadowhunter books. I've never read any other books. I don't even know if she has any other books, but I've only ever read them. In the end, I decided they're still books I'm actively buying. They're still books I'm buying without knowing if they're any good or not. Like, I'm still willing to read them. So in that sense, it's kind of like a semi-insta-buy author because she's insta-buy, providing it's the Shadowhunter books. So I thought it was okay to include her, and I struggled so much over what book I would want to keep. It was really stressful because, like I said, it's a Shadowhunter Chronicles. It's the series, and I initially think, if it's a series, you go for the first one because that's the one that started it all. And I debated that, and I struggled. I had to decide basically whether I wanted to do my favourite book from the Shadowhunter world that I'd read so far, or whether I wanted to pick my favourite characters and a book that featured my favourite characters, because they are two different books. In the end, I decided to go with Clockwork Prince. I know it's going to be quite difficult because obviously it's the middle one in the series. If I could only keep this one, it would be very confusing. But hypothetically, this is the book I really enjoyed the most of the ones I'd read so far. I've read 5 so far. I've read City of Bones, Ashes and Glass, and then Clockwork Angel and Clockwork Prince. And this is my number 1 up to now. And I think that's why I made this decision. It's based off the fact that this is my favourite book I've read of hers so far. My favourite characters in the Shadowhunter world so far are Simon and Isabel. They're my 2 favourite characters, and I wanted to ideally pick a book that they were featured in. But then I thought, this is the favourite overall, and in the end that's just what I went with. So this is obviously a sequel to Clockwork Angel and a predecessor to Clockwork Princess. This is the middle book, and a few people said this kind of features with middle book syndrome, and even though it does that, it doesn't mean in any way it's a bad book. It just kind of features less good quality stuff than the first and last. In my head, this is my favourite. I might not like it as much as the next one, I wouldn't know. I loved it more than the first one, and I can't really talk too much about this one because it's a follow-on. So if you haven't read The Infernal Devices, I would definitely recommend it. And I'd love to hear other people's opinions on this book. So if you actually have read these and you think this is the worst of the trilogy, let me know, because I want to know what everyone else's thoughts are. I love it. Okay, so next, I again struggled with Cassandra Clare about my next favourite author, because I've only ever read one series of their books, and it always seems pointless to pick a series of books because it's obvious which one you're going to go for. You're going to go for the first one. But I thought, no, because again, this is an author I subscribe to. Well, I subscribe to a newsletter from them. That's not something I would do. I don't do that. I don't even do that for my favourite author. But in the end, I thought, yes, include it, it's fine. So I went with Darren Shan, because I've read the Saga of Darren Shan, which is 12 books. So I've read 12 books by the author. And I own more. I own 4 more from the Larton Crepsley saga, and then I own the 10 Demonata series. I just haven't read them yet. And when I was thinking of my favourite book from the Saga of Darren Shan, I did struggle. Again, I thought go with the first one because it's the one that started it all. But really, there is one I really enjoyed the most. And that's Tunnels of Blood. This is book 3, and it's the end of the original trilogy. Because I think because there are 12 books, they're split into 4 trilogies. And this book is the final one, and it follows Darren, Mr. Crepsley, who is one of my favourite characters in existence, and Everett the Snake Boy, who is also one of my favourite characters, from the series. And I loved their dynamic. I love seeing the relationship between Everett and Darren grow. I love seeing the intrigue around Mr. Crepsley and who is he, what's going on. This is also the first one to kind of really introduce the main enemy of the series, which is the Vampanese. And I just thought this was in a class of its own. And this is probably my favourite book in the series. It's hard to know because when I did my 24-hour readathon this year, I did say that I felt all of them kind of just blurred into one because I did them all in 24 hours. But if I was going to pick a standout, it'd be this one. So, my third favourite author is Claire McIntosh. Recently I read I See You, and that book prompted me to make Claire McIntosh an Insta-buy author because I'd read 2 books by her before and I loved them both. And that's it. Yeah, she is my favourite, one of my favourites because of that. And I'm now on a bit of a spree to collect all of her books. So I own I See You. I did recently decide to unhaul it, so I might get a new copy. That's fine. I own I See You. I own The Donor, which is a little one here. I own Let Me Lie, which is there. But I've not read those 2. And then I'm hoping to own After the End, which is another one that I haven't read yet. So in terms of my favourite, I only had 2 to pick from. And that is how you know an author is great, when you've only read 2 of their books and already they're a favourite. I went for the one that I don't actually have with me, and that is I Let You Go. And that is the very first Claire McIntosh book I read. And it was amazing. A woman called Jenna who decides that she needs to escape her past. She is suffering so much with heavy grief and trauma from an incident that happened, and she thinks the only way to recover is to leave everything behind. So she moves to the Welsh countryside, I think, and she tries to rebuild her life after it was destroyed. And then her past kind of comes back to haunt her. And it's about the consequences following that. And it is such a really well written book. It was amazing. There were plot twists. There were really agonizing moments. It was really upsetting to see. It was also really great to see how the plot unfolded. And I think if you're going to read any of Claire McIntosh's books, that is the one you start with. And I think that was her debut as well. So really well done to her for that one. It will come as no surprise that in second place my favourite author is Linwood Barclay, because I love Linwood Barclay's books. You will see from my shelves I own a lot of Linwood Barclay's books. I have classed him as the king of twist endings because, in my opinion, he writes so well and he writes so many different plot twists in a book that when one happens you're like, oh right, so that's the plot twist. It's amazing, well done. And then he throws another one a few pages later and you're just like, whoa. Like, I can't explain. It is so good. I love the drama he builds. I love the plot. And also, quite often, not always recently, I think it's changed a bit recently, but quite often he writes books from the perspective of a side character, which makes him the main character. That was a confusing way to explain it. But basically, he writes books quite often from the perspective of someone who the main action is not happening to. I'm going to just give you a full explanation when I tell you the book. If I could only keep one, I would keep No Time for Goodbye, obviously by Linwood Barclay. Now this book follows a woman who, when she was a teenager, has an argument with her parents, storms off to bed, and when she wakes up the next morning, her parents and her brother have disappeared, and they're never seen again. And when she is an adult, she finds one of her father's hats on her table in her home. She thinks she sees her brother in a crowded shopping centre, and suddenly she's played with lots of memories of her family. She is suddenly convinced that there's a conspiracy going on, because why would her father's hat be there, and why would she recognise this man so much that she's convinced it's her brother. And it's really traumatic as she really tries to find out the truth of what happened to her family that night. And this is an amazing book. I love it so much. I honestly can't explain. But in terms of following another character, obviously this woman is trying to find out what happened to her family. She is plagued with all of these incidents that happened. But this story is told from the perspective of the woman's husband, which is so different, because usually you're stuck following the main character who is living this and having all of these traumatized moments. And in this book, and it happens in other books as well, you're following a character who has no idea what is going on, for starters, and has to learn about everything. So you're kind of really learning everything as it goes along. And I love it. I love it so much. This is the book that started my Linwood Barclay obsession. And this book actually now has a sequel called No Safe House, but I would recommend reading this book. If you want to start a Linwood Barclay binge, go with this one. Okay, finally, obviously, no shock, James Patterson, my favourite author. And I'm going to go with Invisible by James Patterson and David Ellis. This is my favourite standalone book. I have debated whether to include Alex Cross as my favourite book. Like Along Came a Spider is my favourite Alex Cross book. It is my favourite book, I think, of James Patterson's. In terms of standalones, it's this one. I really love this. This story follows a woman whose sister dies in an accident, in a fire. Just an accidental fire. It's sad. She's grieving over it. And this woman is convinced that her sister was murdered. This woman works as a technician. Anyway, she works as someone in the tech part of the FBI, and she's convinced that her sister was murdered, and she wants to find out for herself, because it's been proven that it was an accident, it's been ruled as an accident, and everyone just kind of moves on with it. And she refuses to, because she knows that her sister was murdered, and she takes it upon herself to prove that it was murder. And it's all about her following trails and clues of other accidents that have very similar situations. And I read this book in 2 days, I think, just because I didn't know what to expect. I read it in 2 days, and then I read the sequel to this, which is Unsolved, in 1 day, because I was obsessed. But this is the one. This is the one you need to read. So again, if you haven't read many James Patterson, which according to like everyone on my channel, despite the fact that I keep talking about him, people don't seem to be reading James Patterson. If you're going to, start with this one, because I loved it and it's my favourite. Alright, and that is it from me. I probably am meant to challenge people. Bugger. I'm going to tag Brooke from Brooke's Books, because she told me I'm not allowed to tag her in tags anymore. So I'm tagging her in challenges now. And I think she'd actually enjoy doing this one. It'll be quite interesting, and I am very interested to see her answers. I'm also going to tag Emily from Emily Kathleen Reads. I'm going to tag Steph from Steph Loves. And I am going to tag... who else? I'm going to tag Kira from the Book Bella. So, that is it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it as always. Please make sure to leave a comment down below. I'm really interested to see, as I said with the Cassandra Clare books, if you've read The Infernal Devices, I'm interested to see your opinions on whether Clockwork Prince suffered from middle book syndrome or whether it was an amazing book. I want to know what everyone thinks. I want to know if you've read any of these authors and if you've read any of these books in particular. If not, do you have any other books that I may not have read that you want to recommend? Let me know. So As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you are subscribed and click the thumbs up. Make sure you click the bell so you're always notified, and make sure you comment down below, because honestly the comments mean so much and I love when people comment on my videos. So that's it from me. I post every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday, and then randomly throughout the week if I have something important to post about. And until next time, I will see you guys later.